When a billionaire walked into a rundown diner with his silent son, he expected a quiet meal. What he didn't expect was that a tired waitress would be the first person to reach his son's heart, with just one word. The Bentley rolled to a quiet stop in front of a modest roadside diner, peeling paint on the window trim. The faded name Ruby's Place just barely legible above the door. Liam Hawthorne, billionaire investor, used to private jets and high-rise boardrooms, sat motionless behind the wheel. His tailored suit felt too tight at the collar, though it wasn't. He glanced in the rearview mirror at the boy in the back seat. Ezra sat quietly, eyes fixed on nothing. 8 years old, hands folded neatly in his lap. He hadn't spoken in 14 months, not since the accident, not since his mother died. "Want to go inside?" Liam asked, voice low but steady. The boy didn't nod, didn't shake his head, just blinked. Liam sighed and stepped out, rounding the car to open Ezra's door. The boy slid out, obedient and silent, walking beside his father like a shadow with a heartbeat. Inside the diner, the scent of grease and coffee hit first nostalgic, almost comforting. It reminded Liam of simpler places he used to pass through, long before success devoured his life. They chose a booth near the window. Sunlight pooled on the scratched formica table. Ezra sat still, staring out at the empty lot next door, where weeds climbed the edges of an old fence. Liam ordered black coffee. Ezra said nothing. The waitress came over, a woman in her late 20s. Black Noshin, with tired eyes and a smile that didn't try too hard. Her name tag read Joy. Her hair was pulled into a bun, apron stained but neat. She greeted them warmly and turned to Ezra. "Hey, sweetie," she said. "How about some juice apple or orange?" Ezra didn't answer. He never did. Joy didn't flinch. "Apple it is." She returned a minute later, balancing 2 mugs in a small plastic cup. But as she placed the juice in front of Ezra, her elbow nudged the edge of the cup. It tipped, spilled fast, a cold amber puddle soaking the boy's khaki pants. Oh no, I'm so sorry," she gasped, pulling out a napkin and kneeling instinctively by his side. "Are you okay? I'm such a klutz." She dabbed gently at the fabric, trying not to startle him. Then she froze. Ezra was looking at her, not blankly, not absently. His eyes were focused, and then his small hand moved, reaching out. He tugged lightly at her sleeve. Joy looked up, startled. Liam, halfway through a sip of coffee, felt his throat tighten. His son, who hadn't initiated contact with anyone in over a year, was reaching for this stranger. Liam lowered his cup slowly. His heart slammed once against his ribs, then stopped. He said nothing. Joy smiled, not the kind of smile people give to avoid awkwardness, but one with warmth and curiosity. "You okay, sweetheart?" she asked again, softer now, holding his gaze. Ezra didn't speak, but he didn't look away either, and something in his eyes like a single leaf fluttering before the wind moved. Joy stood up, gently. "I'll be right back with a towel." Liam watched her disappear into the kitchen. The diner hummed with casual conversation and clinking dishes. But to him, the world had narrowed to that booth, that juice-stained shirt, and his son's silent gesture. He didn't understand what had just happened, but he knew that something had shifted, and he would be back tomorrow. The next morning, Liam Hawthorne didn't bother with his usual breakfast in the penthouse suite. He bypassed the private chef, ignored the morning stock reports, and told his assistant to clear his calendar until noon. Ezra was dressed and waiting by the front door before Liam even called for him. They drove in silence again, one familiar and unforced, but somehow less hollow than the day before. Ezra gazed out the window, occasionally watching the blur of trees and passing cars. his small face unreadable as ever. But Liam noticed the difference. His son's hands were not clenched in his lap. They rested open on his knees. Subtle, but new. The same diner, still worn down but honest in its presentation, came into view. Liam pulled into the lot and killed the engine. For a moment, he just sat there, watching Ezra. The boy didn't look anxious. He simply waited. They walked in. Same booth. The same sunlight spilled across the table like memory. Ezra slid in quietly, eyes scanning the room until they landed on her. Joy. She was wiping down a counter, back turned, her soft humming floating just above the dull buzz of conversation. When she turned and saw them, her eyebrows lifted, not surprised, but not expecting either. "You two again," she said with a wry smile, approaching the table. "You must really love bad coffee." Liam offered the faintest smile in return. "Something like that." Joy looked at Ezra. "Hey there. Pants all dry today." Ezra blinked once, but didn't look away. Liam watched carefully. There was no visible reaction from his son, no smile, no nod, but there was an alertness in the way he held himself. Present, aware. "Apple juice," Joy asked gently. This time, she waited. Ezra didn't speak, but slowly, almost imperceptibly, he turned his head and looked at her again. "Apple it is," she said softly, with a nod, as if they had struck an agreement no one else could hear. As she walked away, Liam leaned back in his seat. He didn't try to dissect it. Not yet. But his mind kept circling one thing the way Joy had spoken to Ezra. No pity, no pressure, no overcorrection. Like the therapist who treated his son like a problem to be solved. She had simply treated him like a child. When Joy returned, she placed the juice carefully on the table, then handed Ezra a folded napkin, her eyes twinkling. "Just in case," she whispered, tapping the edge of the cup. Ezra looked at the napkin. He didn't smile, but he picked it up and placed it gently in his lap. Joy turned to Liam. "So, what brings a man in a $1,000 suit back to a place that serves instant mashed potatoes?" Liam hesitated. He wasn't used to explaining himself to strangers, but something about her candor, her ease made lying feel impossible and the truth feel strangely. "Welcome. My son responded to you," he said finally. "He hasn't. In a long time." Joy nodded, eyes serious now. She glanced at Ezra. "Kids don't always talk with words?" "No," Liam said quietly. They don't." They sat in silence for a moment, the sounds of the diner folding around them like warm air. Then Joy excused herself to tend to another table. Ezra watched her go, his fingers brushing the edge of the juice cup. When they left, Joy didn't try to say anything special. She simply waved to Ezra and said, "See you around, sweetheart." Ezra hesitated near the door. Then he turned back, just for a second, and waved. It was clumsy, small, almost shy. But Liam saw it. His heart stopped again, like the day before, not from panic, but from something close to hope. The door closed behind them, letting in a breeze that smelled like wet pavement and sunburned pavement. And Liam knew with certainty they would be back again. By the third morning, the routine no longer felt accidental. Liam adjusted his tie in the rearview mirror, but didn't bother to tighten it. Ezra sat in the back seat with a sketch pad Joy had given him the day before. The boy hadn't drawn anything yet, but he held the pencil lightly, tapping it against the page. It was more motion than Liam had seen from him in weeks. The diner looked the same as ever-chipped paint, slanted awning, and faded yellow curtains in the window. Liam hadn't noticed the curtains before, but now they caught his attention. They looked like they'd been handmade sun-worn, stitched in uneven threads. Someone cared enough to soften a place like this. Someone like Joy. Inside, the morning rush was thinning. A few locals lingered over coffee. A truck driver read the paper. Joy stood behind the counter talking to a teenager washing dishes, her body swaying slightly to music no one else could hear. She wore the same apron, hair pinned back, but there was something different in her eyes when she turned and saw them. Not surprise, not curiosity, recognition. "You're back," she said, "beginning to think you two might be stalking me." Liam smiled, but Ezra's face remained still. Joy didn't seem to mind. She led them to the same booth and handed Ezra a folded paper napkin. "Insurance," she said, nodding to the juice cup, "just in case." Ezra took it. Joy turned to Liam. "Coffee, please." She brought their drinks and returned to cleaning menus, but every now and then her eyes drifted back toward Ezra, checking him without interrupting. This time, the boy opened the sketch pad. He didn't draw anything, just touched the paper, pressed his fingers into the corner, then released. Repeated it. It looked like nothing but to Liam. It felt like presence, attention, a private ritual unfolding in public. After a few minutes, Joy came back and sat across from Ezra, balancing a small plate of toast on her palm. "You like stories?" she asked casually, eyes on him, not his father. Ezra didn't answer. She leaned back slightly. "I used to read to my little sister at night. She never wanted to sleep. Always said she was afraid to close her eyes. Like dreams might forget to come." Ezra blinked. "I'd make up stories about stars who lost their sky, or houses that walked away when people stopped taking care of them." Joy's voice was soft, low. "We'd name every crack in the wall something magical, so the dark wouldn't feel so empty." Ezra's hand, resting on the sketch pad, stilled. "I can tell you one," she offered, glancing at Liam for the first time. "If that's okay." Liam didn't speak. He only nodded once. So Joy began, her voice barely rising above the low hum of the diner. "There was once a boy who lived in a house that had no sound. Everything was quiet. The clocks didn't tick. The floors didn't creak. Even the wind held its breath. The boy never spoke, because he didn't want to break the silence." Ezra was staring at her now. But one day, someone knocked on his window. A girl with mismatched socks and too many freckles. She didn't say a word either. She just started drawing on the glass with her finger. Circles, stars, a bird, and slowly, the boy started listening to the pictures. Until one day. Joy paused. Ezra leaned forward slightly. He laughed. Ezra's mouth parted. Not a sound, not a word. But the smallest change rippled across his face like the moment before a sunrise. Joy smiled. "It's just a story." But Liam knew it wasn't. Later, when they stood to leave, Joy handed Ezra a paper napkin. A small doodle was drawn in the corner, a smiling star with two tiny legs. Ezra took it gently, held it in his hand like something fragile. And for the first time in over a year, as they stepped into the sunlight, Liam felt like the silence between them wasn't a void. It was becoming a space where something might grow. The next morning, the air was crisp, brittle with the first hints of autumn. Liam stood at the mirror in his dressing room, staring at his reflection. His suit was immaculate, his watch gleaming, but his eyes looked tired in a way wealth couldn't fix. He adjusted his cufflinks out of habit, not need, and glanced at the bedroom behind him where Ezra was still getting dressed. They didn't speak much. Words between them were rare, fragile things, and Liam had grown accustomed to silence, not just Ezra's, but his own, too. He'd forgotten the last time he spoke freely, without calculating his every sentence. Even now, as they drove back to the diner, he wasn't sure what he was chasing, only that he couldn't let it slip away. Inside the diner, Joy greeted them with the same easy warmth. Ezra walked ahead of Liam this time, settling into their usual booth. There was no hesitation in him now, just quiet expectation. "I saved you the booth," Joy said, placing two menus down, the one with the sunlight and the crooked table leg. Ezra reached for the sketch pad again. Liam watched him and then turned to Joy. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked. She raised an eyebrow but nodded, stepping toward the counter where he followed. "I want to hire you," he said plainly, "privately, for Ezra." Joy blinked. "You mean like a nanny?" "No," Liam said. "Like, whatever you've been doing." He responds to you. "It's not normal." She folded her arms. "Maybe it's not supposed to be." He hesitated, then opened his wallet and slid a card across the counter. "I'm willing to pay any amount you ask." Joy looked down at the platinum edge card and didn't touch it. "I'm not for sale, Mr. Hawthorne." "It's not like that, isn't it?" Her voice was calm but firm. She didn't flinch, didn't smile, just held his gaze. "I know people like you," she continued. "You solve everything with zeros and signatures. But Ezra doesn't need someone you pay to be near him. He needs someone who sees him." Liam stiffened. "You think I don't?" Joy softened her tone, not cruel, but honest. "I think you're trying, but maybe you've been too busy fixing everything around him, instead of being with him." He didn't answer right away. Joy glanced toward Ezra, who was staring out the window, fingers tapping the napkin doodle she'd given him days earlier. "I don't want your money," she said finally. "But if you're serious about Ezra, I'll keep seeing him here, at the diner, not because you're rich, but because he looks at me like I'm someone he trusts." Liam looked at her with something close to admiration and maybe fear, not of her, but of the truth she just handed him like a mirror. "All right," he said, voice low. "Here, then." As they returned to the table, Joy reached into her apron and pulled out a dog-eared children's book. She handed it to Ezra. "Want me to read today?" Ezra nodded, just once. Barely. Joy smiled. "Thought so." She began to read aloud, voice soft but animated, bringing each page to life. Liam didn't interrupt. He sat still, listening to the cadence of her voice, watching the way Ezra leaned in ever so slightly, his hands flat on the table. It struck Liam then. Harder than he expected, he had all the resources in the world. Access to the finest specialists, the most expensive therapists. But not one of them had reached his son like this woman had. Not with credentials, but with presence. He glanced at Ezra again, who was following every word Joy read with unblinking attention. And for the first time in a very long time, Liam felt not like a man failing to save his child, but like a father learning how to stay. It was a Thursday afternoon when it happened. The air had turned cooler, and the diner was half empty, just a couple of students by the window, and an old man nursing his coffee near the back. Joy stood at the counter, flipping through an old storybook she had rescued from a donation bin. The spine was bent, pages loose, but it had pictures, and that was enough. Ezra had come in with Liam, as he always did now. They had their booth third from the window, with the crooked leg Joy always propped up with a folded napkin. Liam ordered coffee. Ezra said nothing. He never said anything. But that afternoon, Joy didn't just bring their drinks. She brought the book. "This one's about a turtle who's afraid of swimming," she said, sliding into the booth beside Ezra. Silly. Right, a turtle afraid of water. Ezra stared at the cover. Joy opened it, laid it flat in front of him. Want me to read? Ezra looked up at her, just for a moment, then nodded. She started, her voice dipping and rising with the story. Ezra leaned closer, tracing a finger across one of the watercolor illustrations, bright blue waves, a trembling turtle with big eyes. Halfway through the story, she paused. Want to turn the page, she asked. Ezra didn't move. She smiled. It's okay. I'll do it. She kept reading, her tone gentle, as if the book weren't the story at all but the bridge she was building with every word. Across the booth, Liam sat motionless, watching them. The story came to its end. The turtle swam. The fear faded. The final page showed the little creature smiling underwater. Joy closed the book. That was a good one. Huh? Ezra's hands were flat on the table, his eyes fixed on the picture still in his mind. Then he whispered something, so quiet Joy almost missed it. Again, her breath caught. She looked at him, wide-eyed. Liam, who had been staring at his coffee to avoid hope, snapped his head up. Ezra was still staring at the book. Joy swallowed. What did you say? Sweetheart. Ezra's lips parted. His voice was dry, but it came. Again. He said, clearer this time. Fragile, but unmistakable. Liam felt the air in his lungs stall. Joy didn't cry. She didn't gasp or reach for him. She simply smiled, softly, like someone being handed something precious and unexpected. Of course, she said, reopening the book without hesitation. We'll start from the beginning. And she read, page by page. Ezra listened. Liam sat across from them, one hand gripping his coffee cup like it might anchor him to the moment. His heart beat wildly. His throat tightened with the kind of ache he hadn't felt since before the accident. One word. Just one. But after months of silence, it rang through the room like a bell. Ezra's first word in over a year hadn't been to a therapist. Not even to his father. It was to the woman who treated him like he was whole from the start. That night, as they left the diner, Liam paused by the door. Ezra was holding the storybook in both hands, clutching it against his chest. Thank you, Liam said to Joy, his voice low. She nodded. He's doing the work. I'm just showing up. Liam nodded back, but he knew it was more than that. He opened the door, ushered Ezra out into the evening light. And for the first time in all the long months of grief and guilt, Liam didn't feel like a man dragging his son through the wreckage of the past. He felt like a man standing at the edge of something new, something just beginning. By the end of the week, the storybook never left Ezra's hands. He carried it in the car, to his room, even placed it beside his plate at breakfast. He hadn't spoken again, not yet, but that one word had unraveled something. Liam saw it in the way his son sat straighter, how his eyes tracked people as they moved through a room. The silence remained, but it was no longer a wall. It was a room with a door slightly ajar. Liam canceled his meetings for the foreseeable future. His assistant, confused, offered to fly in specialists, but he refused. Every afternoon, they went to the same diner. Joy greeted them without fanfare, always with a smile that wasn't for show. Her stories continued, some from books, some made up on the spot, and Ezra listened with a devotion that made the world seem quieter around them. One afternoon, Joy brought out a coloring book and markers. This one's got spaceships, she said, setting it in front of Ezra. Think you can teach me which ones go faster? Ezra didn't answer, but he flipped the cover open and began coloring the edges, careful not to cross the lines. Joy watched him for a moment, then stood and turned toward the counter. That's when the camera clicked. It was quiet, but distinct. A man near the window, young, scruffy, Phone tilted just right, pretended to check his messages, but the lens had clearly caught the moment between Ezra and Joy. Another click. Liam was on his feet in seconds. Delete it. The man looked up, startled. Hey, it's a public place. Liam's eyes sharpened. Delete it. Now. The man laughed nervously. Didn't realize the Hawthorne heir eats at greasy diners? That's news, Joy stepped in, placing a hand on Liam's forearm. Not here, she said quietly. Not in front of Ezra. Liam's jaw clenched, but he held himself back. The man, now pale, slowly backed out of the diner with his phone still in his hand. The moment passed, but it didn't pass quietly. That night, Joy received a message from an old friend, someone she hadn't spoken to in years. Is this you? The message read, followed by a photo of her blurry face in the background of a tabloid-shot Billionaire. Hawthorne hides out with mystery woman and son. Her phone rang shortly after, a number she didn't recognize. The voice on the other end was cool, polished, professional. Miss Joy Edwards, we represent the board of Jefferson Elementary, where you applied to volunteer several years ago. We'd like to revisit your application, but we have a few concerns. Joy's blood ran cold. She sat down slowly on her couch, Mika asleep in the next room. What kind of concerns? She asked. There was a pause. A recent photo of you has resurfaced, along with chatter about your previous disciplinary record. We'd like to ask you a few questions before we proceed. Joy's heart pounded. The past was here again, dragged into the light, reshaped by headlines and whispers. After the call ended, she sat in silence. It wasn't about Ezra. It wasn't even about Liam. It was about her old life clawing its way back. The lie that cost her the career she once dreamed of now casting shadows again. She had worked so hard to stay invisible. Now the world was knocking. The next morning, she didn't go to the diner. She didn't text Liam. She didn't answer when Mika asked what was wrong. Instead, she opened the closet and pulled down the cardboard box with the rejection letters. Dozens of them. Each one confirming what the world had told her for years. You're not welcome. You're not safe. You're not enough. She sat on the floor, arms around her knees. That afternoon, Liam and Ezra arrived at the diner. The waitress on duty shrugged and said Joy had called out sick. Liam frowned. Ezra clutched the storybook and didn't speak. Back in the car, Liam drove them to 3 different addresses before pulling over and sitting still. He stared at the wheel for a long time. Then he whispered something, half to himself, half to Ezra. She doesn't owe us anything, but maybe, he looked at his son, maybe we owe her. Ezra didn't speak, but he reached out and, without a word, placed the storybook in Liam's hands. Liam didn't sleep that night. The apartment felt too quiet, too sterile. He paced the hallway outside Ezra's room long after his son had fallen asleep, the storybook still resting on the boy's chest like a shield. Every time Liam closed his eyes, he saw Joy's face the day she disappeared, calm but distant, like someone retreating into herself. By morning, he had made up his mind. He drove without a plan, letting instinct guide him. When he finally pulled up to a small apartment building on the city's south side, he wasn't sure how he'd known to come here, only that he had watched Joy scribble her address once on a napkin for a delivery order. He'd memorized it without realizing. The door opened slowly after his knock. It was Mika. She recognized him immediately. Mr. Hawthorne, she said, puzzled. Joy's not, I know, he interrupted gently. But I need to see her, and I think Ezra does too. Mika hesitated. Her eyes were kind, curious. Behind her, the apartment was modest, filled with books and soft clutter. The kind of home people make with love, not money. She stepped aside. "Come in." Liam crouched beside Ezra, who had been silent all morning, and whispered, "Only if you want to." Ezra nodded. Joy emerged from her room a few minutes later, wrapped in a sweater, hair pulled back loosely. She looked tired, older than she had the week before, but she straightened when she saw Ezra standing in the middle of her living room, holding the storybook to his chest. "Sweetheart," she said quietly, surprised. "You found me?" Ezra stepped forward, not speaking. Then, slowly, he opened the book to the first page. Joy's eyes welled with tears, but she sat down on the couch and patted the space beside her. "Come on, then," she said, her voice almost steady. "Let's read." Ezra didn't move. Not yet. His small hands tightened on the book. Then he looked up, not at Joy, at his father, and for the first time, he spoke to him. "I don't want to be afraid anymore." Liam froze. Ezra's voice was quiet, shaky, but real. "I don't like it when people go away," he continued, his eyes fixed on his father, "but she didn't make me feel broken." Joy sat very still, as if breathing too loudly might shatter the moment. Liam knelt slowly, eye level with his son. "Ezra," he whispered, voice thick, "I never meant to make you feel that way." Ezra didn't cry. He didn't need to. He simply placed the book down on the coffee table and leaned against Joy's shoulder. She wrapped an arm around him, gentle and steady, her other hand resting over his. Liam sat back on the floor, watching them. A woman who had every reason to disappear, and a boy who had just chosen to speak. For the first time in over a year, words filled the space between them. Not perfect, not polished, but real. And Liam, the man who had once believed he could buy his way through pain, finally understood some healing doesn't come from fixing. It comes from staying, from being seen, from choosing not to run. The air in Joy's apartment was still, almost sacred. Ezra had fallen asleep beside her on the couch, one hand still clutching the edge of the storybook. His breathing was steady, his head resting lightly on her shoulder. Joy sat motionless, her arm cradling the boy with the care of someone who understood the cost of silence and the weight of trust. Liam sat across from them, in a chair too small for his frame, suit jacket folded over his knees. He hadn't said a word in nearly 20 minutes. There was nothing to say that wouldn't sound too rehearsed, too controlled. And Joy, she wasn't asking for explanations. She never had, but he owed her something more than silence. When Ezra stirred slightly in his sleep, Joy adjusted the blanket over his legs. She looked up, and for the first time since he'd arrived, her eyes met Liam's. "You came here," she said softly. "Why?" Liam exhaled. "Because I was wrong." Joy waited, her face unreadable. "I thought I could protect him by controlling everything. Where we go, who we see, what we allow. I didn't think it mattered how people showed up as long as they had credentials, polished resumes, the right letters after their names." He paused. "But you sat with him, told him stories. You didn't ask anything from him. You just stayed." Joy looked away, her voice even. "That's not what people like you are used to. Is it things that can't be fixed with power?" "No," Liam said. "It's not." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "There's more," he added. "You should know. When I found out your name was starting to come up in the press, I tried to control it. I called in favors. I tried to shut the photos down, bury the story." Joy's brow furrowed. "And I failed," Liam admitted. "I couldn't stop it. And I realized now I wasn't trying to protect you. I was trying to protect myself from the guilt. from the idea that my presence could hurt the only person Ezra's connected with since his mother. Joy didn't speak for a long moment. The clock on the wall ticked gently, marking time they never got back. Then she whispered, "Do you know why I never became a teacher?" Liam shook his head. There was an accusation. She said, "Unfounded." A parent who didn't like that I asked questions about how their child was being treated. They made it ugly. The school board didn't fight for me. They asked me to step back quietly, and I did. She looked down at Ezra, but I never stopped wanting to help kids feel safe. Liam's voice was rough. "I'm sorry no one fought for you." Joy nodded once. "Me too." He stood slowly, unsure of whether to reach for her hand or leave her be. "I know I have no right to ask," he said, "but I hope you'll keep being in Ezra's life. Not because I need you to fix him, but because he's different with you. Braver." Joy rose to her feet, careful not to wake the boy. "I'm not here for you, Liam," she said quietly. "I'm here for him." He nodded, eyes damp but steady. "I know. That's why I trust you." As he turned to go, Joy called after him, "Wait." He paused in the doorway. "You apologize," she said. "That matters. But this can't just be about Ezra." Liam turned. "What do you mean?" She stepped forward. "You can't keep living like this, managing grief through appointments and routines. Ezra doesn't just need presence. He needs your presence, not your protection, not your perfection." Liam let the words settle. He didn't argue. Joy walked back to the couch and gently tucked Ezra's blanket under his chin. "I don't want to save him," she said. "I want him to know he doesn't have to be afraid of love, that it won't disappear again." Liam nodded slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Neither do I." Then, quietly, he left, down the hall, into the soft light of a city evening. For the first time, he wasn't walking away to fix things. He was walking away to begin doing the one thing he'd never allowed himself, learning how to stay. Ezra's 9th birthday arrived quietly, wrapped in autumn air and golden light. Liam hadn't celebrated his son's birthday since the accident. The past 2 years had been marked by avoidance business trips, silent mornings, unopened gifts. But this year was different. Ezra had spoken, not often, not easily, but enough to change everything. Liam stood in the kitchen of his home warm, lived in now with Ezra's drawings taped to the refrigerator and Joy's hand-labeled storybooks scattered across the counter. A cake sat on the table, plain and homemade, frosted with shaky lettering. "Happy birthday, Ezra." Liam had insisted on baking it himself, with Mika's recipe, Joy coaching him over the phone. The dining room had been carefully prepared. There were only 4 chairs, but Liam had set 5. Ezra noticed immediately. "Why's there an extra one?" he asked quietly, his voice still new. "Delicate." Liam knelt beside him. "That's for your mom," he said. "I thought maybe she'd want to be here too." Ezra stared at the empty chair. His fingers tightened around the stuffed turtle Joy had given him the week before. "Can we put something in it?" he asked. Liam nodded. "Whatever you'd like." Ezra disappeared into his room and returned a minute later with a photo creased, soft at the corners. It showed a younger Liam, his wife holding Ezra as a baby, sunlight flooding their faces. He placed it carefully on the seat. That afternoon, Joy and Mika arrived with a box of homemade cookies and an envelope that said, "Ezra, from your favorite girls." Joy wore her hair down for the first time, a soft cardigan around her shoulders. Mika's laughter filled the house within seconds. There was no crowd, no gifts wrapped in gold foil, just a table, 4 people, and one memory seated quietly among them. Joy helped cut the cake while Mika read aloud from one of Ezra's favorite books. Liam passed plates, pouring juice into mismatched cups. Ezra didn't say much, but he laughed. Open, bright, unguarded. It was a sound Liam hadn't heard in years. And when he looked over, he caught Joy watching Ezra too, her face soft, eyes filled with something deeper than pride. Later, when the cake was finished and the room had quieted, Liam stood beside the empty chair. He didn't speak right away. Ezra was curled up next to Mika on the couch, tracing pictures in his new coloring book. Joy leaned against the doorway, arms folded. She would have loved this, Liam said. Joy nodded. She's here. He looked at her. You think so? I don't know much, Joy said. But I know what it feels like when people are remembered with love. That's presence, too. They stood there for a long moment, the room wrapped in the hush of gratitude. Then Joy moved to the small piano in the corner of the room, Liam's wife's old upright. She ran her fingers across the keys softly, then looked at Ezra. Want to sing something? Ezra hesitated, then nodded. Joy began to play a lullaby, slow, familiar, the kind mothers hum while rocking their children to sleep. And then Ezra sang. His voice was uneven, but sweet, untrained but honest. The words were shaky, then stronger, and the house, once heavy with silence, filled with a melody it hadn't heard since the day his mother died. Liam closed his eyes. Joy kept playing, and in the quiet, just before the last note faded, Liam felt it. The empty chair wasn't so empty anymore. It was full of memory, of forgiveness, of love rediscovered. The morning after the birthday, Joy returned to the diner before sunrise. She unlocked the front door, stepped into the still dark space, and turned on the lights one by one. The yellow curtains glowed faintly as the early sun pushed against the glass. She moved slowly, wiping down tables, checking the coffee filters, her body performing the rituals it knew by heart. But something inside her had shifted. Ezra's voice still echoed in her memory, fragile and clear, humming along to the lullaby she once sang to her sister years ago. She hadn't planned to cry, but when he sang, when he looked toward that empty chair like it still meant something, her heart broke open, not in pain but in permission. She was still thinking of that moment when she found the letter. It was tucked between the pages of a worn library book she'd checked out on a whim the day before an old novel about a teacher who brought a village back to life. Inside the front cover was a folded, yellowing sheet of lined paper. Joy recognized the handwriting instantly. It was her own, 12 years younger. She had written it during her first education seminar in college. The assignment had been simple. Write a letter to your future self as a teacher. Tell her who you hope she becomes. She had completely forgotten about it. Hands trembling, she unfolded the letter and began to read. Dear Joy, you're probably tired. Teachers always are. But I hope you still believe in stories. I hope you remember that children don't need perfection, they need presence. I hope you still listen more than you talk, and that when a kid is quiet, you don't mistake it for emptiness. If you're reading this, it means you didn't give up, or maybe you did, but found your way back. You are meant to make kids feel safe. That's your job, and no one can take that from you, not unless you let them. Love, Joy. Age 19. She pressed the paper to her chest and sat at the back booth, Ezra's booth. The letter sat beside her coffee cup as the sky turned from silver to blue. She hadn't let anyone steal her voice. Not really. She had only buried it. But now Ezra had helped her unearth it. Without knowing, he had handed her back a dream she was too afraid to reclaim on her own. Later that day, after her shift ended, Joy returned to the school district website. She clicked on the volunteer tab not to reapply as an aide, but to request a meeting with the board. This time, she wasn't going to explain away what happened years ago. She was going to speak the truth. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a teacher, a storyteller, a protector, and now because of one silent boy and his father who finally stayed, she remembered. That evening, Liam called. "How's Ezra?" she asked. "Asleep early," Liam said. He wanted to bring the storybook into bed. Joy smiled. "I found something today," she said. "A letter I wrote to myself, when I still believed I could do this." And now Liam asked. Joy looked out the window, the sun falling behind the city skyline. "Now I'm going to become the woman I told myself to be." There was a pause on the other end. Then Liam spoke quietly. "I think you already are." Weeks passed. The leaves turned from gold to rust, and Ezra's voice, once a rare, delicate thing, grew steadier with each passing day. He still didn't talk much, but when he did, it was always with intention. He asked Joy questions about her stories. He asked his father what stars looked like from airplanes. He asked Mika if she thought turtles could dream. One crisp Saturday morning, Joy stood outside the school board building, a folder clutched tightly in her hands. Inside were letters, one from Mika, one from Liam, and one from Ezra, scrawled in uneven pencil. "She makes me feel safe. She makes me want to talk." Joy sat before the board with calm she hadn't known she possessed. She told the truth. Not the version smoothed over for acceptance, but the full, sharp, breathing truth about what had been done to her, about why she had left, and why she had come back. She didn't beg. She didn't ask to be given anything. She simply reminded them who she had always been and what children like Ezra needed. The board members, once guarded, listened differently this time. By the end of the week, she received a call. The district wanted her back not as an aide, not as an assistant, but as a teacher, a classroom of her own, a new beginning. When she told Mika, they cried together, then laughed through their tears, dancing awkwardly in the middle of their tiny apartment to a song Mika had written on the piano app of her tablet. Joy didn't tell Liam right away. She waited until Sunday, when he and Ezra came to the diner, just like they always had. Ezra ran ahead now, opening the door and choosing the booth without a glance. Liam followed at a more careful pace, holding a cup of hot chocolate he'd picked up from Joy's favorite stand. "You look lighter," he said when they met at the counter. "I am," she replied, sliding a plate of toast toward him. "I've got a classroom starting in January." He paused, taking that in. "You did it." Joy shook her head. "We did it," Ezra called out from the booth. "Joy, can we read the Space Turtle one again?" She smiled. "In a minute." "Sweetheart." Liam watched her cross the room and sit beside his son. Not above him, not behind him, beside him. She opened the book slowly, like something sacred, and Ezra leaned in without hesitation. Liam sat in the booth across from them, the same booth he used to occupy alone, clinging to hope like it might break in his hands. But now, the space was filled with warmth, with voice, with presence. After they finished the story, Ezra stood on the seat, placed his hands on both Joy's shoulders, and said in a clear, sweet voice, "You're my favorite grown-up." Joy blinked. "I thought it was your dad." Ezra grinned. "He's second." Liam laughed, and for once, didn't mind being second. Joy looked up at him. "You okay with that?" Liam nodded. "More than okay." Outside the diner, snow began to fall soft and quiet, blanketing the street with something fresh. Later that night, Joy walked past the piano in her apartment and paused. She lifted the lid, pressed one key gently, and then another. It wasn't just Ezra who had found his voice. It was her. She was never just a waitress. She was a teacher, a healer, a storyteller, and somewhere between the spilled juice, the picture books, the boy who whispered again, and the man who finally stayed, she had become exactly who she was always meant to be.